before we begin, I wanted to let everyone know that I am going to be at Sakuracon, April 14th through 16th, 2017, in Seattle, Washington. I'll be hosting a panel there titled Blatant Copyright Infringement in Anime on Friday, April 14th at 1:30 p.m., and that panel will look at examples of music in anime that aren't exactly original. Be sure to pop in if you want to say hi or learn a few things about copyright infringement. Hey everyone, welcome to Zonan Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge. Returning to the show this time around is Pan. She used to run the classic anime info site Lilola.net and is now a notable cosplayer from the Toronto area. And we're also going to be talking extensively about Power Rangers today, and she is certainly one of the most passionate Power Rangers fans that I know. So, Pan, thanks a lot for coming back on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure talking with you. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to be starting by talking a little bit about Power Rangers and Super Sentai as cross-cultural media, specifically in Canada. And assuming we get around to it at the end, there was also a recent confirmation that the Toronto Conservative Leadership Conference for the Conservative Party of Canada selecting their new leader is actually going to be taking place the same weekend and in the same venue as Anime North, which is certainly certainly an interesting circumstance, but I understand not a completely unprecedented one.
No, we had the provincial conservatives, I think,
Oh, yeah.
in the exact same building in 2011. So it's not the first time that this has happened at Anime North.
Yeah.
No.
Well, we'll get to that in a bit. But I guess when talking about Power Rangers, the best place to start is going to be, well, considering that this is early April and the Power Rangers Hollywood movie, or rather Saban's Power Rangers, as you're supposed to refer to it, has just recently been released. At the time that we're recording this, I guess this topic has already kind of become old hat because the week after the Ghost in the Shell movie came out, and everyone started talking about that. But then the Ghost in the Shell movie also completely bombed, and I think that pretty much ended all the discourse happening around that thing for the most part. So, who cares? Let's just talk about what we're going to talk about here. So I have not seen the Power Rangers movie, and I mean, to be perfectly honest, I love Power Rangers as a kid. For quite a long time. I watched it right up somewhere partway through Power Rangers in Space, which I understand is a little longer than average kids were into the show, but not quite as long as most super nerds who were watching it were into the show. So I kind of fell somewhere in between there. But despite the fact that I loved it as a kid, I have Power Rangers nostalgia has always been a little tricky for me because, as a cultural theorist, I have a hard time just getting over this idea that Power Rangers didn't become big internationally until it became, or Super Sentai didn't become big internationally until it was Americanized as Power Rangers. So that's always been kind of my frustrating barrier. But Pan, I know that you've been a longtime Power Rangers fan. You were anticipating this movie for a very long time, and I think I am more interested in hearing your thoughts on it. And I understand that you have seen it.
I have seen it. I actually was at a anime comic convention the weekend before it came out, and I won tickets. So I actually went to a preview screening the Wednesday before it came out, which was really, really great. And it meant that I got to see it in a theater filled with other Power Ranger fans, which was also really fun. And I just want to say, you said, super nerds are the only people that stayed and watched the show longer. And I just got to say, woo, super nerds, if that's the case. But yeah, I thought the movie was actually quite good. I had going into this movie, I had a lot of apprehension. And you know what? I have to say, without being too spoilery, I absolutely loved it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. There were a lot of surprises in there, like things that I was not expecting. Like if you go and watch this movie, within like the first 6 minutes, you'll know that this isn't the Power Rangers you watched when you were a kid.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't earn its PG-13 rating, and it does earn it quite early on in the movie.
I know that the first review that came out for this movie was from Uproxx, and I did read that, and it talked about like a subplot involving revenge porn and a bull being jerked off, and also copious Krispy Kreme product placement. Now, now I'm just going to assume that all of these things made more sense in the context of the film than when they're described out of context of the film.
So right before I went to see the movie, people were posting bits and pieces of these, like, of basically exactly what you were saying, that kind of review online, and I was like, oh no, this is going to be a disaster. Like, what are we going to get ourselves into? And my other fear going into the movie was that they announced just before the movie that the Yellow Ranger, Trini, was going to have a bit of a coming out scene.
Mm-hmm.
And there were also rumors that they would quote unquote like kill off a ranger, and you know, knowing the context of pop culture, I was really, really, really scared this would be one of those like kill the gays thing. So I went into this movie going, please don't kill Trini, please don't kill Trini, please don't kill Trini. And I'm going to spoil this part. They don't kill Trini. So it's safe to go see this movie. And yeah, all those things actually that you mentioned do happen, and they all make a lot more sense in context. This is a movie that I feel like if you tried to summarize it would just sound absolutely ridiculous, but actually works given like how they put all those pieces together. Some of those things you mentioned are within the first 6 minutes that I sort of talked about. They were setting up this tone of like, this is going to be different. It's surprisingly, and in my case, like from my opinion, this is like something I really enjoyed about it. It's a character piece. The Rangers don't do all the morphing and fighting thing until way later in the movie. This is a criticism a lot of people have of the film, that it takes a long time to sort of get going, but I like it because you get a chance to meet all 5 of these characters and really get to know them and see them sort of start to mesh as characters. So it's actually a character-driven piece, and I feel like that's something that actually makes this movie, that's actually what I really, really like about this movie. And, you know, this movie has gotten a lot of praise for diversity, and I think that it earns that praise for the most part. You know, only one of the 5 Rangers is white. The Yellow Ranger does have a scene where she confirms in some ways that she's not straight. She doesn't necessarily say what she is, but I think that that's totally legitimate as well. It's a very short scene. The movie has been getting a lot of praise for this very, very short scene. The short scene, I would say, is very, very important. And no one should tell you that it's not important. At the same time, maybe no one should tell you that it's enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have seen some criticisms of how they handle that and saying that they're not committing to it enough, or they're holding back so that, you know, certain markets that are more sensitive to that kind of thing can't backlash against it, like we saw with Beauty and the Beast in Malaysia, that whole ridiculous controversy.
Well, like Power Rangers got a like 18+ rating in Russia.
Yeah.
For that scene. And it's a very short scene, and I'll spoil it. So spoiler warnings. A character asks Trini if she's having boyfriend problems, and then they correct it. She sort of gives them a look, and she corrects it. This character corrects it to, oh, do you mean, is it girlfriend problems? And she doesn't confirm or really deny that, but the line after it, she ends up talking a lot about labels and how she's very unhappy with her parents, for example, like love and use of labels. And if you're part of like the LGBTQ community, like that line will resonate with you. I'm speaking from experience here, I guess, but like that line resonated with me, like that line afterwards. And that, I think, coming from, my own perspective, I was like, oh my gosh, I actually like love that scene. Again, it was very short. I would have loved more, but I still think that scene was very, very important. The character that stood out to me the most, and I ended up just absolutely loving, was actually Billy. So Billy is played by R.J. Seiler in this movie, and they've done something new with Billy. So Billy in this movie is confirmed to be on the spectrum. He's autistic.
Mm-hmm.
He says he's on the spectrum. In the movie, they portray him as being autistic. And I've been like going through Tumblr and reading the reviews of people who are autistic who watch this movie and like how do they feel about the way Billy's been portrayed. And like everybody loves it. Like everybody loves the way they portrayed Billy. He stims. He's, you know, there's just so many things about him that people feel that they did quite right. And Billy is also the heart and soul of this movie. He's the ranger that brings them all together in many different ways. And he's the one who believes in them being a team before anybody else believes in them being a team. So it's kind of cool that you have this, you know, you have a character who's autistic, who's actually also black. And that's also important because autism is misdiagnosed or even not noticed in black people. So that, you know, having a black autistic character is a big deal and important for representation. So we have this black autistic character who's a superhero in a major motion picture, and I think that's who's also like the heart and soul of the film. So I think that's like super, super cool. And I don't know, I really love the movie, and I really love Billy. I loved all of them, but I love Billy, yeah.
I think that in the actual Power Rangers show, you know, it's been very good for diversity since the beginning. I think that's an aspect of it that often gets overlooked, and it seems like amplifying that or emphasizing that in the film is one of the things that makes it most successful as an adaptation of the franchise. You know, when you go back and watch the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, typically you'll find that the characterizations are not really that good in the show. Did you find that, did they kind of just scrap everything in this movie and start from scratch? Or do you still see, you know, the basic traits of those characters evolved in this adaptation?
I think that's a good question, but
Yeah.
it's not one that I've actually, I think, asked myself that much. I think I've treated these characters as, like, unique characters. You know, Zach in this movie is a different Zach from Mighty Morphin. His name is still Zach,
Mm-hmm.
but he's a different character named Zach. I think I've done that for, like, pretty much all the characters in this film. Like, and I think that for me, that works because they are different. I mean, they're played by different actors. They're sometimes different races. They're got different traits. They have different backstories for the most part. So that they're different characters for me. They're fundamentally different characters.
The thing that I am most curious about, and I guess this is subjective.
Mm.
Do you feel that this movie is true to the, you know, traditional Sentai, Super Sentai aspects of the original Power Rangers, or does it kind of, you know, try to evolve it into something else, or does it invent something new?
It still has like a Zord battle. It's all original footage.
Mm-hmm.
I would say like it's more like adapting Power Rangers, which is then a step divorced.
Yeah.
Even further divorced from Super Sentai.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant. Is it kind of reinventing it? Do you still see is it still drawing from kind of those Sentai sensibilities, or is it inventing something new that
Well, I mean, like you're having a Zord battle. For me, that automatically is drawing from the Sentai, right? Like Zord battles are all from the Sentai. There were very few examples, I think, of Zord battles in Power Rangers that were actually like original footage made for Power Rangers. For the most part, it's the Japanese footage. So like for me, Zord battles are Sentai. But I mean, it's a Zord battle that's destroying, I think it's Kamloops. I think they're destroying Kamloops.
Yep. I believe it is indeed Kamloops that they destroy in this movie.
Yeah, so that's different.
Yeah.
You know, again, I feel like the best way for me to put that and understand that is like it's a step, like Power Rangers sort of is a step divorced from Sentai, but still uses Sentai, and this is a step that's like even further divorced. There's no Sentai in it at all, for the most part, but there's like no Sentai at all in it, but it still like harkens back to these Sentai elements from the original show.
And yeah, you raised the interesting point that this film was, like many films, shot in British Columbia and in Kamloops specifically. And given that Kamloops is nothing like Southern California, I'm assuming that this creates a very different kind of atmosphere for the Angel Grove that they're presenting here. Did it feel like more of a, small town than a sunny California place?
Absolutely. It's very much like a little small town. But my favorite thing, and this goes back to your thing about Krispy Kreme, they built a Krispy Kreme in Kamloops so they could film all the Krispy Kreme scenes. This movie is filled with Krispy Kreme product placements, and some of them are terrible, and some of them are, like, for the most part, I think they handled it really well. It's pretty hilarious how they handle the product placements. But I love that they built a Krispy Kreme in Kamloops just so they could do filming around this.
But did they keep the Krispy Kreme there? I don't think they did.
I don't think they did. I'm very sure they took it down the second their filming was done.
See, that's bullshit. Okay, over in Ontario, like in Toronto, are there any Krispy Kremes in Toronto?
Okay, so I had to Google it. Googled it after I saw this movie. Not that I plan to go to Krispy Kreme, but because I was curious. There are 3 in Toronto, I think.
Really? Okay.
I've never been to one.
All right.
And I looked at the map. I'm like, okay, I know all these places in Toronto, but I've never really been to a Krispy Kreme in Toronto. So I've been to one in the States, but not here.
I can tell you that there is one Krispy Kreme in British Columbia. It is in Delta, which is the weirdest, that is like, distant suburb of Vancouver. The weirdest place you would put a Krispy Kreme. It opened back when I was in high school, around 2001 or 2002. And it has always been the only one in all of British Columbia, is in that one little tucked away Krispy Kreme in Delta. And I actually only went to it for the first time late last year. I had never even, I would never even think to go to Delta for any reason. But I wound up going there for the first time and trying and actually going to the Krispy Kreme store. People do fundraising, sell Krispy Kreme fundraising stuff all the time. You find that at schools, you find that at transit stations, but I think it is very rare that anybody would actually take the time to make a trip to go to this one Krispy Kreme, and I don't understand that. Why they wouldn't expand. It's Krispy Kreme. You think that they would be able to find more of a market, especially in a market where, you can. We love our donuts in Canada. We go to Tim Hortons all the time.
I was gonna say Timmy's.
Yeah, you got Timmy's, and they're just begging for competition a lot of the time too. And you think that Krispy Kreme would make more of an effort to get in on that market, and to know that they built a Krispy Kreme in Kamloops only for the purpose of this movie, only to dismantle it later and do nothing to make good on that. That infuriates me.
You need to now see this movie for the sole fact that it has a Krispy Kreme in it and for what they do with Krispy Kreme. I'm telling you right now, I think you will find it hilarious. So
you know what? We've just spent the last several minutes talking about Krispy Kreme, so I think it's pretty clear that I need to see the movie for that reason.
You need to see. I'm not saying that's the only reason. There's a lot of good reasons to see this movie. And again, it's a fun movie. It's not a perfect movie. There are tons of plot holes in it. It's Power Rangers, okay? Yeah. It's Power Rangers. You got to go into watching this movie with that in your mind. And it's got a ton of plot holes, and they're frustrating plot holes, like the kind that can be fixed with 5 seconds of exposition.
Yeah.
5 seconds of dialogue would have fixed this, but it's still a solid film. It's a really fun film. The critics seem to hate it. If you go to Rotten Tomatoes, the critics hate it, but the audience loves it. Mm-hmm. I think the Globe and Mail gave it 1 star, and they have an entire article on just it's not even a review of the movie. It's just how much they hate Power Rangers. So it's not a movie that was made for the critics. It was made for the fans and for people to sort of get into, I guess, this franchise and just have a lot of fun watching the film. And I think it definitely succeeds there.
I haven't seen the film, so I can't comment on its quality or whether the critical reception has been appropriate. I can't help but suspect that a lot of the critical response is more of an attack on millennials than it is on Power Rangers, or just the idea that, this is something that only millennials are going to appreciate because only they're going to be nostalgic for it, and we can't have that. Because I guess that's the whole thing, is that millennials are huge nostalgia fiends, quite possibly bigger than baby boomers, but nostalgia has always been like a big baby boomer thing, and maybe some people don't like that.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I've been sort of ignoring the critics completely.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, if you just go, for example, to, you search the movie up on Twitter or on Tumblr or something, you're gonna find, almost entirely positive reviews of the film from people who are just come back from seeing it. A lot of people come back and they're like, oh my gosh, this movie was amazing, or I really connected with Zach, or I really connected with Billy, or I really, like, I'm really impressed with how they did this, and people are seeing it multiple times because they're having fun watching it. So, if you're going looking for like an amazing winning film, you're gonna be disappointed.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna, spoiler warning, you're gonna be disappointed. Oh, and something I should note is that this film probably should have some major trigger warnings on it. There are some really good posts on Tumblr that sort of discuss triggers in this film. Basically my thing with triggers is always take care of yourself, take care of your own mental health. I will warn for one in particular, there are some major graphic, violent, sudden and abrupt car crashes in this film that some of them that come out of nowhere. And I've read a couple people like saying that they like had to leave the film after, especially the second one, because it was just so jarring. So just know that there's things in this film, that may not just use your own, if you're worried about this film, there are posts out there that like discuss, these are the things that happen that could be unsettling. So you can like look that up and you can go into the film informed that, this is what's going on, and you can judge for yourself whether or not you'll feel comfortable actually watching this film.
Yeah, that's important for sure. Yeah. So, just to move on, as I touched on at the beginning, like Power Rangers as produced by Saban originally is what has come to define Super Sentai internationally. It's the version that was exported to more countries. It is the version that most people associate Super Sentai with, rather than the actual Super Sentai shows that come from Japan, which usually don't get exported outside of Asia, except Hawaii and I think and a few other regions. It has always seemed strange to me for a lot of reasons, and something that I've always been kind of critical of from a cultural standpoint. Nonetheless, there are a lot of fascinating stories behind its development. Inverse.com published an article recently focusing on Margaret Loesch and her role in getting Super Sentai, or bringing Super Sentai to the West, and how it how the involvement of people like Stan Lee and eventually Haim Saban, and how it just kept changing hands. Nobody would give it a chance. And the expectations were so low that when it wound up being this major hit, nobody was ready for it. It's a really fascinating story, and I recommend reading into it. And that's only one of many stories behind the development of Power Rangers. It is one of the most fascinating journeys in localization that I think that has ever happened for any major property. But Power Rangers has had an interesting journey, particularly in Canada. And that's for a few reasons. It started on Fox Kids in 1993 with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And that is where the majority of Canadian children watched it, assuming that at least those that had access to cable or those who had access to Fox border stations. And as we were both there, we were both kids watching Power Rangers at the beginning, so we remembered it, or we remember at least hearing about this vague controversy. It started on YTV a few months later. Quite famously, it was banned from the airwaves shortly after it debuted on YTV, in a decision that was very highly publicized. Chances are, if you were watching Power Rangers at this time, a lot of Canadian kids didn't even notice that this happened, because YTV was always very far behind in the broadcasts, and anybody who had access to Fox Kids, which I should point out is not everybody in Canada, not everyone is able to access Fox, but the majority, you just follow it on Fox Kids because they actually had the new content and they were always way ahead. But nonetheless, this was a very famous chest-thumping incident from the CBSC, the Canadian Broadcast Standard Council. You may have heard of them. I guess if you have watched TV in any long duration over in your lifetime, or at least in the last 20 years, you've probably seen their little ads that run that stations run to insist that they're being compliant with their standards. So the CBSC, I should point out, is not an actual regulatory agency, but an industry self-regulator, meaning that it's completely useless. They were first established in 1990, and I think that what most people know them for is back a few years ago there was that they issued a statement prohibiting radio stations from playing the uncut version of Dire Straits' "Money for Nothing." And that was there was a huge backlash to that. And most of that backlash was directed at the CRTC, despite the fact that they had nothing to do with that decision. So, one of their most notable decisions is something that they're not even attributed with. So, CBSC is really this kind of useless, invisible organization. But, if you go back in time to 1993, this was one of the first things that they did. They were established in 1990 and basically did nothing for their first few years. But just a few years later, there were these new guidelines that were established concerning violence in children's programming. And they just really wanted to show that they had teeth, and Power Rangers just happened to wind up being the target. So Pan, I'm sure you remember this happening. What was do you have any thoughts on?
I have a lot of thoughts on this. Yeah. I think it might have actually been 94. I'm not 100%
94,
sure.
yeah. Sorry, 93 is when the show debuted. 94 is when the ban happened.
Yeah, and I actually remember watching the show. This is one of those strange memories.
Mm-hmm.
I remember watching YTV, and it was so Mighty Morphin Power Rangers aired weekdays as part of The Zone,
mm-hmm.
and PJ Phil was really upset and not apologetic on air when he announced that the show would not be, the first season never finished airing on YTV. And I remember watching The Zone and Phil being we can't show Power Rangers anymore. I'm really sorry. And I think they might have done a phone poll or something to see if the show would come back. It never did.
They did, yeah. They did do a poll regarding that.
And it was interesting because again, what you said, the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council had no teeth, and YTV stopped airing it even though this council had no power to do anything to them. Also interesting was that I think in Ontario a station called Global was airing Power Rangers, and they also stopped airing Power Rangers at the same time.
A lot of Global affiliates were running Power Rangers as well. I believe they were. I have not been able to find a confirmation of this, but I've heard some people claim that they tried running a censored version for some time. I don't know how they would have accomplished that.
I'm not sure either. I've actually never heard that. I did look up, the old ban at some point, and there's an article in from the Washington Post from 1994 about this Canadian ban on Power Rangers, and apparently the entire thing is because of only 2 complaints from Ontario parents that they got. That was it. They had 2 complaints. That from parents saying their kids may have been kicking the air or kicking each other or something.
Yeah. Which kids would have done anyway, because even if kids kick and punch each other, that's just kind of the reality. They might say they're playing Power Rangers or say they saw it on TV, but the reality is, those kids probably would have kicked and punched each other anyway. So.
Yeah, I couldn't find it, but there was years ago I found it on YouTube. There was this it was an American news broadcast, I don't know, from one of the major news networks. And it was from 1994 when they were discussing, is Power Rangers too violent? And this news reporter went to a schoolyard and they showed an episode of Power Rangers, and then they showed the kids, and the kids were all kicking the air in the playground, but none of them were actually kicking each other. They were just really excited. And the news reporter was I'm not sure this is actually really dangerous. And, I'm not really good on the American side of this, but there was a huge discussions about Power Rangers being too violent in the United States in around 96-ish. There was this plan, I think, the Clinton administration is trying to see if they should make like guidelines, like government guidelines for American TV, especially for kids TV. And they ended up being this like industry lobbying group that ended up pushing for the industry to sort of regulate itself. And this is really, really important in like Power Rangers political history, for the lack of a better term, because it's when Saban starts entering politics, which is another topic that you probably want to touch.
Wow. I have a lot to say about that topic too, but
yes, let's skip that. But that's actually sort of important there. And something else I always found really interesting is one of the other countries that's banned Power Rangers at the same time was New Zealand.
I know, which is ironic because the franchise would later become based in New Zealand.
Yeah, so it's still banned in New Zealand, but the show has filmed there since like 1992, and it's also ironic because
I think you mean 2002.
That's right. What did I say? 92? Yeah, 2002.
Yeah.
And it's also ironic because the New Zealand government gives like millions of dollars in grants to Power Rangers to promote New Zealand. So like the most recent series, like the one that aired last year and the year before, Dino Charge, is like there are episodes that are like basically like come to New Zealand. There's a character from New Zealand. There's like an episode dedicated to New Zealand, like dessert, like a specific dessert from New Zealand. There's like the Rangers go to New Zealand, like it's all about New Zealand, and it's hilarious because it's like this tourism, ad for New Zealand for a show that's banned in New Zealand, and I just always thought that was really funny. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's banned completely in New Zealand. Nobody can broadcast it.
I think so. Yeah. The actors in the show, like the New Zealand actors, can't, like the Kiwi actors can't actually watch the show.
Well, I would imagine it's probably streaming or on Netflix or something.
For sure.
Down there, but yeah, I guess if you don't have those many years of television exposure, it does make it a little more difficult for it to take hold with a lot of the audience.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, like, going back to the what you were saying, from around 1993 to 2002, YTV, there was this blip of YTV, a blip of Global. For the most part, we watched Power Rangers on Fox, or, your local Fox affiliate. There was an exception to that in my area. It might be in some other areas as well. So, like, I'm in the Toronto-ish area. And from, like, I don't know the exact years, but it was at least a year, maybe two, starting in around, like, 1996. There was a station out of Barrie, Ontario, called the New VR. And they would basically plant their New VR logo over the Fox Kids logo, and they would plant their ads over the Fox Kids ads.
Yeah. So basically they were sim-subbing Fox Kids programs, essentially. Yeah.
And they were there for, again, about, like, 2 years, I think.
Yeah.
Can't remember.
Around that time, it was rare for Fox Kids programming to be sim-subbed. That definitely didn't happen across the country. Very few local Canadian broadcasters were taking on children's content or even sim-subbing children's content. But for the most part, Fox Kids was the only place to see this show, and I guess it just shows how many kids were watching American broadcast in addition to Canadian broadcasts as well.
Yeah, for sure. And then Fox was the only place to watch it until 2001. So in 2001, there was something major happened, and that was that Disney bought Fox Family Worldwide. So Fox Family Worldwide at this point included Saban Entertainment, which included Power Rangers. So Disney ended up owning Power Rangers. There's like a complicated history here of like Saban joining with News Corp in like 1996 and stuff. I don't know how much of that is really relevant, but the thing that always hit me is like how much Disney paid for this. Like Disney paid like over $5 billion for Fox Family Worldwide, and Fox Family Worldwide became ABC Family Worldwide, I think. And at the time, Power Rangers Time Force had was airing, and like Wild Force, which is the series that followed it, was in pre-production. And I think Disney had to finish whatever was in pre-production because of a contract with Fox Kids. So they made Wild Force. So Wild Force is interesting because it was made by the same like production team and like the same crew as all the other like previous Power Ranger series, and it was still filmed in LA, but it was actually made by Disney. And then in 2002, Wild Force, the first 26 episodes aired on Fox. And then once that sort of contract expired, and I think like Fox Kids basically shut down at this point. You might correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was about the time it became Fox Box. I don't know if that was... Yeah. I'm not sure if 4Kids had taken over the block yet at that point, but it was around... It was around there. And I think Fox Kids, like, because again, Fox Family became ABC Family. So the last half of Wild Force aired on ABC Kids, which was ABC's new Saturday morning block. I found this really frustrating. I remember exactly when this happened because my local ABC stations didn't air it. So I could watch every episode of Power Rangers, and I was really happy I suddenly couldn't find it or watch it at all. So I guess just to take a step back and get an idea of the timeline here. So when Power Rangers was, quote unquote banned from the airwaves in 1994, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that ban technically only applied to the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I don't think it really applied to any of the later incarnations because they didn't know those incarnations would exist at the time. Exactly. They were making that. Yeah. Despite that, everything from like right up until 2002 with Wild Force, none of that aired on any really no cable Canadian broadcasters aired that stuff, with the one exception you pointed out with the new VR and probably a few other local affiliates across the country may have aired some of them briefly. But those are definitely exceptions. For the most part, Power Rangers is something that only showed up on American affiliates. That is where that cultural beacon came from for people in Canada. And that was disrupted significantly during the Disney buyout because, of course, ABC. So when ABC started airing it, they were airing the affiliates that did show it were ABC affiliates. It hadn't moved to cable in the U.S. yet at that point. But that did happen very shortly after that, I understand. I'm not 100% sure. So this is where my understanding of a lot of like the history of, or like where Power Rangers airing gets really fuzzy because I couldn't personally watch it. I had someone in the U.S. like tape it on VHS and mail it to me. Oh, really? So, wow. We were still at the point where that was like that was a necessary process for a lot of people too. That's how I watched it. So I'm probably at this point, how to watch it in Canada is not a question I actually know how to answer because I was just like, I can't do it. I'm going to figure out a way around it. And like I'm sure if anybody would have been able to figure out where to watch the show in Canada, it probably would have been you too. But who knows? Like again, in my ABC affiliates, like the ABC channels that were available, probably a better way to put it, like the Disney-owned channels that were available to me did not show it. Yeah. It did show up on Family Channel when they were because they had an agreement with Disney to show their content. But I think now I don't know if this was just because of questionable or questionable scheduling practices at Family, or because Power Rangers still carried a stigma that had been in place for like a decade up to that point, which I guess now would have been around 2003 or 2004. I think everything after Wild Force that's the point when it started showing up on Family Channel, I believe. But they would always air it at like 6:30 in the morning. It would be buried and effectively like off of anyone's radar. So it wasn't really like you could say that at that point Power Rangers as a cultural artifact was simply not getting it, had no traction in Canada. It had no way of getting proper exposure or anything, and it was just off the cultural radar completely. I think so. The exception was always the toys. The
Oh,
toys,
yes.
for the most part, and it's interesting too. Like after 1994, YTV's like, okay, we're not gonna show Power Rangers anymore. They still show the toy commercials. I know this because I would videotape. Like I have old VHS tapes of other shows, and they have Power Ranger toy ads in them, right? So yeah, like the toys were always available. So like my friends and I actually loved Ninja Storm, which was the first series that was completely Disney made. They moved the productions to New Zealand, yada yada. We loved that, and we ended up marathoning that here. We did not acquire it by watching it on television, but we ended up buying each other the toys for it because the toys were still available.
That's always one of the that's something that seems to happen a lot. You have these situations where shows that depend on revenue from merchandise aren't always like what you see in stores does not reflect what you actually see in the media in Canada, in television, or even available online now a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I remember I had this exact same frustration with G Gundam, because G Gundam is probably one of the strangest circumstances of an anime not airing in Canada when it was airing in the States, because you saw the toys showing up in stores here. In fact, stores were so flooded with G Gundam toys that arguably is one of the big things that sunk the initial Gundam push in North America. And then a few years later, we got Gundam Seed, which actually was a big success in Canada, but it was not a success in the U.S., so the toys never made it up here. And it just shows how successful something or how well established something is on television does not reflect the often much more important merchandising push that happens. And if these things would just work in tandem better,
yeah, exactly.
if they'd actually like pay closer attention, if one hand knew what the other was doing and they actually paid attention to the differences in the Canadian audience, what the Canadian audience is seeing, what the Canadian audience demands, then you would get a better sense of what is successful in Canada, what is popular in Canada, what has cultural traction in Canada. But I mean, to this day, it seems that companies don't seem to really care about that. They have a tendency to lump Canada and the U.S. together as a market, without actually paying attention to these things. Yeah.
And we know historically that Canadian American markets, while often are similar, we have so many examples of so many differences.
Yeah.
I keep thinking my example I always think of that is always Sailor Moon.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
Like, yeah. So
one of the rare instances where the merchandise actually sold better here, and that led to more of the show getting dubbed into English, at least for a short period.
Yeah.
Never forget.
Yep. Be proud.
Yeah.
So, and I think, so like, in terms of like the history of Power Rangers broadcasting in Canada, I'm actually like sort of at a blank until around 2009, 2010. Mm-hmm. And 2009, so Jungle Fury was a series that premiered 2008, 2009. Well, Jungle Fury was supposed to be the last year of Power Rangers. Disney didn't want to do it anymore. And then there was like either a contract with Bandai, or I've heard mixed reviews, or there was like a population outside of the U.S. that was really still, doing well with Power Rangers, especially in Europe. So they ended up Disney had to make another series, and that ended up being RPM. And they were like, this is it. This is the last time we're making Power Rangers. And they did their best to not promote the series, speaking about not promoting it and airing it at terrible times. I think it moved from Disney channels, because it was on Jetix, and I think Jetix became Disney XD somewhere around here. They dropped Power Rangers, and ABC Kids started airing it, but it was airing at death time zones.
Yeah.
5:30 in the morning time slots. They didn't want to deal with Power Rangers anymore. They kind of wanted to bury it. And then that season ended, and they were like, okay, we're done. And they actually, the series was canceled. It was actually canceled. They shut down the production in New Zealand. Everything was done. And in 2010, Saban sold Saban Entertainment back in 2001, 2002. So now Saban comes back with Saban Brands, and he buys Power Rangers back from Disney, and he sort of renews all this collaboration with the Japanese companies. And what I found interesting also about this is when Saban, when they sold that chunk to Disney, and again, it was this Fox chunk. It was really, really large, included all sorts of properties, including Digimon, for example. It went for like $5 billion. When Saban bought Power Rangers back, Disney wanted nothing to do with it anymore, so I think he got it back for like $43 million.
Mm-hmm.
And Power Rangers disappeared. There was a couple months sort of overlap, but like Power Rangers disappeared from the Disney parks. Power Rangers disappeared from like any ABC Disney stuff. And Saban, there's a rumor that Saban told Disney, oh yeah, I'm going to start my own channel and I'm going to air Power Rangers on it. And apparently he, like, of course, took the show and sold it to Nickelodeon. I'm not sure if that was true, but he did sell the show to Nickelodeon, and Nickelodeon, like, picked it up and they started producing. They started airing, like, the 700 episodes of reruns that existed at the time, but they started making Power Rangers Samurai. And this is also the year where, like, the first 32 episodes of Mighty Morphin re-aired on, like, I think this is still Fox. They aired it on, like, ABC Kids with, like, new graphics.
I remember people whining about that.
It was weird. They added, like Batman-esque, like, effects to it. And, yeah.
Yeah, that's an example of how not to update something, I think.
You know what? People were okay with it because it meant they re-released a lot of the old Mighty Morphin toys.
Yeah.
So people were like, oh my gosh, I've always wanted this Megazord, now I have it. So that was
back to the
cool.
toys again.
Yeah, and then the other thing at the same time that's happening is, you might know more about this than I do, but like Chorus and like YTV, they wanted to make a new channel, and they made this agreement with like Nickelodeon, like in the States, and they created Nickelodeon Canada.
Yep.
And then because of this agreement with Nickelodeon in the US, they got to air Power Ranger Samurai. But Power Ranger Samurai, to my understanding, didn't air on Nickelodeon Canada. It aired on YTV.
It did, yep. Nickelodeon Canada. I don't know this for sure, but it is widely understood that the existence of Nickelodeon Canada is just a kickback that allows YTV to get other benefits with Nickelodeon properties. The station is just kind of there because Nickelodeon wants it to exist, but by keeping that station alive, despite the fact that nobody watches it and they don't really do anything with their schedule on that station, it gives them a wider access to Nickelodeon properties. So yeah, at that point, that's when when Power Rangers showed up and returned to YTV.
It returned to YTV,
yeah.
And they aired, so Nickelodeon does this thing, and I think it's Nickelodeon, they have like a certain set number of episodes per season, so Power Rangers is like usually somewhere between like 36, 45-ish episodes a season. They ended up cutting these seasons in half for Nickelodeon, so this is why you get Samurai and then Super Samurai, which is just a continuation of Samurai. Or Megaforce, Super Megaforce. So Samurai, Super Samurai, and Megaforce all aired on YTV. And then in 2014, Chorus bought Teletoon.
Yep, they bought Teletoon, and their strategy at the time was to move any quote unquote boys properties over to Teletoon, and that included pretty much every action animation and also Power Rangers. So Power Rangers was moved to Teletoon, despite the fact that it is not animated, but it is quote-unquote boy-oriented, so it gets kind of lumped in the same category. Yeah. And,
I was hearing people say, like, Power Rangers boy-oriented, and I know, like, when I went to the theater to see the Power Rangers movie, like, it was mostly guys at the theater, but, like, in my life, majority of people I've known and interacted with who've loved Power Rangers are all women.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, I was like, okay. But yeah, so starting with Power Rangers Super Megaforce, again, they kind of divide the seasons in half. Power Rangers is aired on Teletoon, and it's still airing on Teletoon. So Dino Charge, Super Dino Charge aired on Teletoon,
that is the current home of Power Rangers in Canada now. This is probably, well, it's also on Netflix, which Netflix is arguably the best exposure a lot of those older seasons have gotten here. But it's back on TV, more prominent than ever. I think they run it Friday nights and Saturday afternoons.
Yeah, and Saturday they are actually airing the new season, which just came out. I think they're only a couple episodes behind the American airings. It's Ninja Steel. So Power Rangers is on TV in Canada again. Yeah, it has for a while, but
if you follow Power Rangers now, it's I think this is the best it's been. The best it's been for Power Rangers in Canadian media. You get it streaming and you get it on TV. Pretty much not far behind the U.S. broadcast. So.
And if you want some entertainment, the YTV website has been doing a lot of push for like the Power Ranger movie, and like the Zone has been doing like this marketing push for the Power Ranger movie, which again PG-13, more violent, etc. than the predecessor that was banned.
Yeah.
In 1994, and you can watch like Carlos on the Zone being like, "Go see the Power Rangers movie," and like interviews with the actors and things like that. It's very interesting to me.
I don't know, YTV has a long history of promoting like PG-13 or harder edge PG movies in Canada.
Oh, I'm not saying anything about that. I'm just saying because of the history here.
Yeah.
There's something about me as this like older person watching this that is just finding this amusing.
There's a delightful irony behind it for sure.
Yeah, it's just like okay, awesome.
And I noticed that YTV on their website has been engaging with a lot of 90s nostalgia stuff as well.
They have a quiz.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to find it on the website. I actually found it through Google. And the Wayback Machine tracks it back to July 2016 because I was trying to figure out when this thing appeared. So it might be marketing for the movie again. But it's like, what Power Ranger are you quiz? But it's based on Mighty Morphin. It's based on the original Mighty Morphin.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. You banned that show, but okay.
Yeah, but it's it's the one that 90s kids most fondly remember because I think for most 90s kids, it's the only one that they watched. If I recall correctly, pretty much the viewership. I know that Saban was always determined to not change the costumes because I guess they had some market data that showed that kids did not respond well to the costumes being changed, which presented problems because they change every year in Japan.
Yeah, they ran out of Sentai footage. Yeah,
and had to go back and film more Sentai footage, and then eventually they caved and there was the Alien Rangers thing where they did a test drive of how people would respond to the new costumes, and then they finally went forward and changed the costumes in Zeo, and that's kind of when the major Power Rangers went down very far in terms of like major mainstream popularity. It was still huge, of course, but it took a huge hit. It did take a huge hit after that. I guess there was something to that marketing data they had. Yeah,
for sure. They used 3 different Sentai footage, footage from 3 different Sentai series in Mighty Morphin.
And as I touched on before, I love Power Rangers as a kid, and I've always just kind of found it difficult to be nostalgic for it. Because I've always been uncomfortable with this idea that Super Sentai was not really recognized until it had been Americanized. That's always really it's bothered me more than it probably should. And I personally find it more interesting to go back and watch those old Super Sentai shows because I get to experience the stuff in its original context and gain kind of a deeper appreciation for it in that sense. And since I am definitely in the minority of people who feel that way, because people are more than happy to completely indulge in Power Rangers nostalgia, especially for the Zoo Rangers / Mighty Morphin era. And then with this movie, we're seeing it taken to another step, which is another unique problem where entertainment in general is not legitimized until it's been made into an American film. And I think that's a mentality that's really gripping media in general right now.
I think it's also, I think it's also like, it's that second separation that makes the new movie really sort of more complex.
Yeah.
It's that second step removed. But there also is, and I'm not trying to take away from your point in any way, shape, or form, but there is a lot of people who who are interested in the Sentai. What's the name of the company? Why am I forgetting it? Shout Factory?
Shout Factory,
They've released Zoo Ranger, subtitled in English.
Yeah, they've released
officially
Zoo Ranger, Die Ranger, and the Ninja, I think is the third one. And those are actually
Ranger?
I'm not sure. Car Ranger is coming too. The first 2, Zoo Ranger and Die Ranger, are actually streaming for free on Tubi TV.
Cool!
Which is where the same place where Sailor Moon is streaming in Canada, so you can actually watch them for free there. It's pretty cool. I still really wish they'd release Jetman though. That's supposed to be a really fun one. And apparently it was supposed to be the show that Power Rangers was originally going to adapt, but it just kept getting delayed and they shifted it over to
They took
Mighty
too
Morphin.
long.
Yeah. Which is probably worked better because kids love dinosaurs.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of my view on Power Rangers, and I think it's interesting that it is still interesting that like the Americanized Power Rangers has had so much cultural pollination around the world. I've even read that in Korea, where they usually just get dubbed versions of the Japanese Sentai shows. In some cases, because there's still so much stigma around samurai and samurai imagery in Korea, that whenever they get to like a samurai-themed Power Rangers, they would actually go and instead take an American or a samurai-themed Sentai show. They would go and grab an American Power Rangers show of something that they already dubbed the Japanese version of, and just kind of, because it's different enough, just dub that into Korean and run that in its place.
I've never heard that.
Yeah.
I know that. Okay, so I know Dino Charge. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna forget what the Japanese right now is. But the Power Ranger series we had like for the last 2 years, they're actually making their own Korean version of it right now.
Oh, really?
It's like yeah, they're making their own like quote unquote Power Ranger version of it, and I think it has like a whole bunch of like K-pop idols in it. It's kind of interesting.
It does.
And then the other thing that you made me think of is like there's a bunch of seasons of Power Rangers that then got dubbed into Japanese and resold like in Japan. That's a thing that happened. They take Power Rangers and then they redub it in Japanese, and it's interesting when they redub it because they hire back the actors from the original Sentai. So like the person who played like the Red Ranger in Japan plays like the voice of the Red Ranger in like the Power Ranger version, and then they sell it back. Like Power Rangers.
I think you're just screwing with us on that one.
No, I'm not. It's real.
No, I think they are. I think they're just messing with everyone.
Yeah, but I mean, it speaks to this like complex relationship. I've always wanted to know more about this. Like again, with like them making footage for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers season 2, there's issue like the stunt crews to some extent overlap. There was talk about some of the recent series that have been filming in New Zealand, filming parts of the Sentai. I don't know what happened with this, so bear with me. But there's filming parts of the Sentai and filming parts of Power Rangers simultaneously. So like, there's a complex relationship between the two. I don't know how complex that actually is or whatever, but it's a little messy. And I've always sort of been interested in the relationship between them, and also I've always wondered what the Japanese production companies get for Power Rangers. Like, how much are they actually compensated for that? I've always been curious about that as well. As to your point about, like, Sentai definitely never has had the reach that Power Rangers has had. I mean, Power Rangers airs in so many markets. I remember I was in Turkey a couple years ago, and they had, like, Power Ranger magazines, like, at the corner store, and I was like, wait a second, what's... Because it's marketed in so many different languages, right?
Yeah.
So, I think you have like a legit point there for sure. And I mean, especially with the first, it doesn't change that much in later seasons, but especially with the first seasons where they're literally dubbing over Rita. They're really literally dubbing over the Japanese actors and stuff like that. There is, I think, that should be problematized probably more than it is. It comes out of that era of, localizations being a thing. And then, of course, we have to talk about why were localizations considered a thing in the first place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there have been efforts with Ultraman and other Sentai shows to actually just dub the Japanese actors for the entire thing rather than trying to film Western actors.
Yeah.
Doing it. So, but obviously the Power Rangers approach has been more successful. I mean,
they're not trying to sell the same show, right?
Yeah.
They're making, it was like Saban being like, this is a cost-cutting measure. Let's just use half the footage from this Japanese series. We'll dub it over. It'll be fine. And then we'll make this suddenly about like, 90s, teenagers.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is the same, like Saban, I'm pretty sure was also behind like Samurai Pizza Cats and other shows that were Japanese shows that they just sort of took and
repurposed. Yeah.
Samurai Pizza Cats and its original are not quite the same thing, as we know. So
well, Samurai Pizza Cats is the better the better product in my opinion, but
Oh no.
your mileage may vary, I guess.
Yeah, I still like I still love Power Rangers. I've been watching it now for more than 20 years. So.
Well, Pan, I remember the last time I had you on, I asked you hadn't seen Power Rangers Megaforce.
I hadn't seen Megaforce.
Specifically, Power Rangers Megaforce Robo Night Before Christmas.
I still haven't seen it. I knew you were going to ask me this. So I've made progress. Because last time I think I was like, I've seen 3 episodes of Megaforce. I think I'm up to 10. I'm sort of watching it on Netflix. I'm not getting very far. And I think I'm just not in the, like, I just can't get into it, and I'm not in the right frame of mind to watch it. It's not, like, gripping me in any way, shape, or form.
It's not going to, trust me.
Oh, no. I'm kind of waiting, because, like, sometimes even if the show's bad, like, you know what I mean, like, you can love, like, the characters or something. And I like the Ranger team in Samurai, that's great, in Megaforce. I do like quite a bit, so I'm like, okay, maybe I'll just watch it for them.
I find the characters are weirdly endearing in that show. Rather, as a production, it is weirdly endearing. It's not good at all. but I was
Power Rangers.
Yeah, I was yeah.
Yeah, so like I'm hoping like I'll get to the point where I'll just be like I just want to watch it for these characters. So I will eventually watch it. It's like the one season I still haven't seen. I'm sorry.
Well,
but
I was introduced to it under very strange circumstances. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. And yeah, the series that came after it, Dino Charge, I love quite a bit, and I have issues with, obviously, like every Power Ranger season. I mean, like, who am I kidding? But, like, I like Samurai, which came before it, to some extent. And I like Dino Charge, at least especially the first half of Dino Chargers came after it. So I will go in and fill in that Megaforce space at some point. Maybe not today, but
Yeah.
I'm not in a huge rush, but it's still going to be there. Yeah, but yeah.
Okay.
I haven't seen your Christmas special. So.
All right. Well, I think we have thoroughly explored Power Rangers in global and Canadian context. So before we go, let's just touch on this conservative leadership convention thing.
Yes.
So yeah, if you're not familiar with what's going on with that, the Conservative Party of Canada is electing a new leader. And they're going to be having multiple conventions across Canada on the day of the vote, which is May 27th. That is the same weekend as Anime North, and not only is it the same weekend, they're in the Toronto convention is taking place in the same venue as Anime North. They're
in the North building. So the Toronto Congress Centre has like this South building and the North building, and the North building is separate. Like there's like literally a driveway. There's a road between them, thankfully. And the North building is much smaller. The last couple of years, Anime North has used the North building. We do a lot of our stage shows, our masquerade. Like I help out with the masquerade, like the costume contest and stuff like that. And we do a lot of that, for the most part, in the North building. So this year, the North building was taken away from us, to my knowledge, and they're doing the Federal Conservative Leadership Convention there. Again, this isn't the first time we've shared space with the Conservatives. I think it was 2011. The provincial Conservatives had a convention at the same time. And there were a couple things that I remember about that in particular. One, there were protesters that showed up, and they were asked by police to leave. And they were, like, holding protest signs against they were standing, like, sort of by the street, like where the convention center meets the street, holding these giant protest signs. The problem is that if anybody looked over, all they saw was a mass of, like, 20,000 people in costume. Maybe not that many people at a time, but I mean, like, Anime North has like 24,000 people or something at this point, right? A lot of it's outdoor. Like, a lot of Anime North is outdoor, outside the South building of the Toronto Congress Centre. That's where, if you're wearing a costume, that's where you go to be seen and to, like, walk around. And if you want to look at costumes, that's where you just wander around and just, like, me and my camera, I'm there just taking photos of all these beautiful costumes that people have spent so much time and energy on. I love being outside, especially when the weather is pretty decent. So here's these protesters who are asked to leave, and like all anybody from the road can see is like this mass of cosplayers. They ended up trying to split the parking lot and I don't know how well that worked, because Anime North is so large that we end up using the North Building's parking as well. So we'll see how that goes this year. And the one thing that really annoyed me personally the last time they were there was that they would drive these people in like suits or business attire, which are like, the conservative higher ups. They would drive in golf carts through like the main like cosplay thoroughways of Anime North. They just drive through it, and like sometimes they'd block traffic or they'd stop their little golf cart to take pictures of people. And for the most part, I think a lot of people knew what was going on, and some people just didn't. And they were like, okay, some guy's asking me for a picture, so they just would get into those pictures. So for me, there was always a question about consent in there as well. Like, did people know what they're doing? But they were a bit of in my opinion, they were a bit of a hindrance. This year, with the political climate being a little bit different and a little bit more sensitive, and I really kind of want to protest.
Yeah.
I want to be a protester this year rather than a cosplayer.
Well, here's one thing I'm concerned about. I know that there's definitely a strain of far right far right activity in anime fandom. Are you do you have any concern that this is going to embolden certain attitudes within people at the actual attendees at the convention, like people bringing out alt-right bullshit or something?
It might.
Because I would imagine that Kelly Leach is going to be at the Toronto one.
Oh god, yeah. Staff and security hopefully will nip that in the bud.
Yeah.
I have this feeling I don't know. I'm like the lowest totem pole down of I shouldn't even use that phrase, but I help I'm a stagehand level of staff. I'm not privy to a lot of the information out there, and everything I say, is in my own opinion. They might do something to sort of try to keep the two parties separate. So for instance, where that division, they might try and keep people have somebody from security trying to keep people out of the north area, even though literally the area between the north and south buildings is where there's a school bus that goes from the different locations of Anime North because it's so large. That's one of the school bus stops. So I don't know, they might rejig some stuff to keep people separate. That seems to be the policy of a lot of conventions when they're next to other conventions. So in Toronto, I don't know, it was 10 years ago, I don't remember, one of the smaller anime cons was right next to a Scientology convention, and they hired people to, they had security guards, keeping doors closed and keeping, the two parties very, very separate. So I'm wondering if they're going to do something like that. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Anime North has has a huge team of volunteers that help with security, and people who are not volunteers, but they have a huge team that help with security. So hopefully they'll have something in mind to sort of try and keep trying to keep the peace there. Anime North tends to be a very diverse place, so hopefully no one tries to do anything hateful. I have this small worry that, I kind of hope that there might be a protest against this convention, but I'm also wary because so many times protests come with a police presence, and I'm worried about that police presence more than I'm worried about the protesters. I don't really worry about the protesters. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, there's no way to really know for sure. I'm hoping they don't drive golf carts through our convention and interrupt things and I want them to stay on their side of whatever. And maybe I gotta figure out a way to incorporate a protest sign into my costume or something.
That's a great idea. I think this could inspire some very creative cosplays from people.
We'll see how it goes. One of my friends two of my friends actually, I don't know if they bought or they found a way to get membership to the Conservative Party. Not because they want membership for the Conservative Party, just because they want to vote on that day. They want to vote against certain, more Trump-like scary candidates.
Yeah.
So,
if anybody is voting in the, I know some people who talked about doing that. I can't bring myself to do that myself because I think I've made my political views quite clear on this show in the past. But it is a ranked ballot, so it's going to be really interesting to see how that pans out, because like that means that none of the polling is going to be really reliable. There are so many factors in the way that they're picking their leader. So yeah, that's going to be
It's going to be something.
Yeah.
And like best case scenario, we have very little interaction with them, and they don't elect someone who's the next Trump, and we survive. And that's sort of what I'm hoping for.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens on that, I guess. I think we should be careful not to forecast what we think is going to happen with that.
No, I'm not. I have no idea. What's. Yeah. So I'm hoping for the best. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
All right. Well, maybe we'll have you back on after Anime North, and
you see what happened.
You can give us a status report.
Oh no.
Pan, thank you so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure.
Well, thank you for having me. This was fun.
Thanks a lot. Just a quick note to end off on. After we finished the episode, Pan and I had a very lively discussion about Haim Saban's shady political activities over the years, and I have to say I really regret that we did not touch on that in the actual episode and instead chose to go on a big rant about Krispy Kremes. Not that that was not important, but, this is, it's interesting stuff. Unfortunately, I did not record the conversation that we had, so I can't even retrofit it in, so that is going to have to wait another day. But Power Rangers is a topic that has a tendency to keep popping up on this show over and over again for some reason, so maybe we'll explore it a little more in the future. Thanks for tuning in to Zonen Canada. The theme song is by Ultraclystron and can be found on his album Packet Flood, which you can find at ultraclystron.com. You can reach me on Twitter at ZonenCanada or email zonencanada@gmail.com. Please subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play Music, or your podcast app of choice, and leave a rating or review if you have a chance. If you know anyone who might like this show, please recommend it to them. See you again!
This station believes in being accountable to you, the viewer, in our drama, information, and entertainment programming. We are a member of the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council, and as such, are committed to the highest standards of broadcasting. If you have a comment to make about our programming, write to us. We'll respond to your letter and send you information on the Council and our codes. This message is brought to you by the Canadian Association of Broadcasters and this station.